Everyone says AI is replacing developers. You've heard it, I've heard it. It's been the headline for 3 years now. But that's not what this data says. Stanford dropped their AI Index 2026 this week, and buried inside are two numbers that, when read together, tell a completely different story than what every tech media outlet is running with. Junior developer employment, ages 22 to 25, is down nearly 20% since 2024. And the second thing is the gold standard of coding, the SWE bench verified, went from 60% to 94% in a single year. Here's what nobody is saying. Those two numbers describing two different jobs. And which one you have right now determines everything about your next 5 years. Let me set the scene, because context matters here. The Stanford AI Index 2026 dropped this week, and it is 400 plus page report. Most people won't read it. Most media outlets cherry pick one line, that AI is disrupting software jobs, and called it a day. But when you actually pull the data, two findings jump out together. And reading them together is the only way to understand what's actually happening. Finding number one is employment for software developers aged 22 to 25 has fallen nearly 20% since 2024. That's not a rounding error, that's a structural shift. And then the finding number two is SWE bench verified, the benchmark that tests AI models on solving real GitHub issues, went roughly from 60% to 94% today. As of this month, Claude Mythos preview sits at 93.9% on that leaderboard. For context, a year ago, AI could handle about 60% of standard coding tasks autonomously. Today, it can handle nearly all of them. Now, here's what everyone does with these two data points. They put them in the same headline, that AI is replacing developers. Clicks, engagements, move on. That framing is wrong, and it's not just academically wrong, it's practically dangerous if you're building a career or a team right now. Because what Stanford actually found is bifurcation. I've hired developers for my own agency at Mentorflow AI, worked inside engineering orgs at eBay and Remitly, and I've watched this exact dynamic play out from multiple angles. The mistake everyone makes is treating developer like one job. It's not, it never was, and AI just made that distinction permanent. Let me give you the quick timeline, because how we got here matters. Pre-2022, tech is booming, overhiring everywhere. The conventional wisdom is to get a CS degree, grind lead code, get the job, work your way up. Junior developers could reliably get offers. Late 2022, the hiring freeze hits. Meta cuts 11,000. Salesforce, Amazon, Twitter all follow the major cuts. At the time, everyone called it a macro correction, overhiring plus rising interest rate plus economic uncertainty. Most people didn't frame it as an AI story. It was. Because in 2023, Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude enter mainstream developer workflows. Senior developers start producing more output without adding any headcount. Junior hiring quietly continues to fall. SWE bench launches. Top AI models score 2 to 5%. 2024, SWE bench verified launches and scores accelerate fast. Top performers hit 40 to 55%. UK entry-level tech roles fall 46% in a single year. Salesforce publicly announces zero engineering hires in 2025. CS graduate unemployment hits 6.1%, nearly double the national average. Let me say that again. Computer science graduate, people who did everything right, are sitting at 6.1% unemployment, while the national rate is around 4.2%. That is not a rounding error again. Late 2025 through early 2026, SWE bench crosses 80%, then 90, then 90.3. Stanford compiles the employment data, and this is where we are today. 4 years, a slow motion elimination of one specific kind of work, and barely anyone connected the dots until Stanford published this full picture. So let me show you exactly what these two jobs are, because the difference has nothing to do with years of experience and everything has to do with what kind of work you do. So let me describe the job number one for you. This person gets assigned a ticket. The ticket says, build a login form, add pagination to this table, fix this bug on line 247, write a test for this function, something similar. They open their IDE, write the code, push the PR, move on to the next ticket. They are excellent at translating a requirement into syntax. That is the whole job. And here's the thing, that is precisely what SWE-bench measures. Real GitHub issues, real code bases. Read the issue, write the code that fixes it, and AI is now solving 94% of those issues. One more data point on SWE-bench, because it tells you something important. OpenAI publicly announced they stopped reporting SWE-bench verified scores. Their reason? The benchmark has become saturated, near 100%. It no longer differentiates between frontier models. When the most widely used AI coding benchmark becomes too easy to measure, that should tell you everything about where we are. So when an executive looks at their junior dev team, a team of people whose primary daily output is converting tickets into code, and then looks at what AI can do today, the math is not complicated. This is not a failure for developers. The work they were hired to do has been automated. Not partially, not in theory. Right now, today, at 94% accuracy. And here's where it gets more personal. If you're learning to code right now by grinding lead code and building CRUD apps, you are training for job number one, and the one that's being eliminated. I see aspiring builders do this constantly. Spend 6 months learning React syntax, CSS frameworks, how to connect with a database, and yes, you need that foundation. But if that foundation is also the ceiling, that's the trap. So why does this matter to your life specifically? The reason is because the entry-level developer role has historically been the on-ramp, the place where you get the reps, prove yourself, and then move up. That on-ramp is now pretty much gone, and executives know it. A third of organizations, according to McKinsey data cited in the Stanford report, expect AI to actively shrink their workforce in the next year. Software engineering is one of the top 2 functions named, and this is not a future concern, it is a current policy. But here's where the story splits, because while job number 1 is contracting, the job number 2 is doing something completely different. And the thing that separates them, it's not skill level, it's not years of experience, it's not even how good you are at coding. It's something most people never think to optimize for. And I'll show you exactly what it is. So with that, let me describe you job number 2. This person does not execute tickets. They decide what the tickets should say. They look at the product and ask, what are we building here and why? What's the architecture that serves the next 18 months of growth, not just this sprint? Where are the failure points? Not the bugs, not the structural points. How does this system connect to that system? What happens when we hit 100,000 users? These are not coding questions, if you listen to me carefully. These are product and system questions, and AI cannot answer them because the answers require the context that lives inside the business, not inside the code base. And AI doesn't know that your biggest enterprise client has a compliance requirement that makes your current auth architecture a liability. AI doesn't know that the VP of product promised a feature in 2 months that will require a full rework of your data layer if you don't refactor now. AI doesn't know that the real bottleneck isn't the code, it's the third-party API that's been quietly failing at 2 a.m. every Tuesday. Knowing those things and making decisions based on them is job number 2. And here's the irony that the AI is replacing developers' narrative completely misses. AI has made job number 2 more valuable, not less. Because the leverage is enormous. A senior developer who can direct AI to produce code is not doing 1x or 2x the output of a junior. They're doing 10x, 20x. The constraint is no longer can you write the code. The constraint is do you know what the code should do and why and how it connects to everything else. That question has always been the hard part. AI just made it the only part that matters. And if you're building a product right now or hiring for one, this changes your calculus immediately. You don't need a team of 5 junior developers to execute tasks. You need 1 or 2 senior product engineers who can direct AI and own the system. And the team will outperform the old team at a lower cost at extremely high efficiency. I've run this exact equation with clients. The ones who understand it early reorganized before they had to. The ones who didn't are the ones who are making the painful cuts. Now here's where I need to show you something that should genuinely alarm you, because the job losses we have already seen happen before the real AI deployment ever started. And that's the story. I want you to sit with this for a second. The 20% decline in junior developer employment that already happened, past tense. But AI adoption across most enterprise business functions is still in single digits. The widespread autonomous AI deployment that everyone keeps talking about as a future event, it's barely started. But most companies have not yet deployed the AI that everyone says is going to replace workers. And the jobs are already being cut. And here's what that means. This is not a company looking at their payroll and saying like AI is doing James' job, so James gets cut. This is a company looking at its hiring plan and saying we are going to bet that AI will be able to do that work within next 18 months. So we won't hire for it. Nobody talks about this, but the preemptive cut is fundamentally different dynamic than the reactive cut. Executives aren't waiting for evidence. They are making the strategic bet on AI capability ahead of deployment. And here's the uncomfortable nuance I want to name. Most companies have not actually changed how work gets done. They handled employees the tools, ChatGPT, Claude, and called it AI transformation. And very few restructured the work itself. The job cuts happened anyway. So think about that. They're not cutting because AI proved it could do the job. They are cutting because they are betting it will, and they'd rather restructure now than be caught flat-footed later. And the Stanford data confirms that bet is rational. Because when you look at SWE bench going from 60% to 94% in 12 months, the trajectory is obvious. Why build a pipeline of junior developers that AI will outperform within a year? It changed the hiring before most companies even turned the technology on. And this is the thing that changes how you should be thinking right now. Not will AI affect my career eventually, but the market already priced in it and you may not have noticed. So if you're watching this as someone who wants to build a career or as a founder who's building a team, the question isn't whether to respond. The question is exactly how to respond. And there's a very specific set of moves that puts you on the right side of this. But before we learn those moves, let me be very direct. If you are an aspiring builder, a junior developer, or someone who's learning to code, this is not a reason to panic. It is a reason to redirect. The goal is to shift your ratio. More on job 2, less on job 1. And here is exactly how you should do it. Number 1, stop building features in isolation. Start building systems. When you build your next project, even a personal one, force yourself to write an architecture doc before you write a single line of code. What are the components? How do they communicate? What happens when they break? What's the data model? And why the data model is designed this way. I've seen this one habit that separates the developers who advance in their career from the ones who stagnate. The code is almost secondary. With AI, it's definitely secondary. The thinking before the code is the job. Number 2, get in the room where the problem is defined. Now, this is the move almost nobody makes, and it is the most important one. Find any opportunity, client project, open source, your own startup, a friend startup, and instead of waiting for a spec, write one. Talk to a user, identify a real problem, define the requirements yourself, and then try to build the architecture for them. The skill of translating a messy human problem into a clear technical solution is the skill AI cannot replicate and work on its own. And you only develop it by doing that repeatedly. Third, use AI as your junior, not as your crutch. So here's the thing. The developers who are winning right now aren't the ones who code the fastest without AI. They are the ones who can direct AI most precisely. That means knowing exactly what to ask for, how to evaluate the output, and when the output is subtly wrong in ways that will cause problems 6 months later, they know it. For founders watching this, the implication is a bit different but equally concrete. Here's the math. 3 junior developers at, let's say, 80 to 100K each. That's like 240 to 300K per year in salary. 1 senior product engineer, that's like 150K, plus AI coding tools maybe like 5 to 10K a year. That's 155K in total. The startups that understand this bifurcation early build leaner, smarter teams from day one. The ones that don't hit a brutal wall in 2 years. Not because the product failed, but because the team structure accumulated technical debt that nobody owned or understood. I've watched this play out from the inside at big tech companies and with the clients at my agency at Mentorflow AI. At every large org, even smaller orgs I have worked in, there's an unspoken caste system. The person who writes tickets is different from the person who decides what sprint contains. The person who implements the feature is different from the person who owns the roadmap. Those 2 tracks exist everywhere. They're just not always labeled. What AI did is remove the economic jurisdiction for the first track. So if you're at that stage where you are trying to figure out what the team structure should actually look like for your specific product, the architectural decision making, that is exactly what my team at Mentorflow AI works through with founders. We are a team of product engineers who have an average of 10 years of experience in architecting and building products with AI. Link is in the description if you'd like to connect. But whether you work with us or not, the larger point is the same. The market is no longer rewarding code output by itself. It is rewarding judgment about what should be built. Which brings us back to the 2 charts I started with. Junior development employment down nearly 20% since 2024, and AI coding performance going up from 60% to 94% in a single year. And I told you that reading them together tells a completely different story than AI is replacing developers' story. Here's that story in 1 sentence. AI is not replacing developers. AI replaced one of the 2 jobs that call themselves developers. And the executives figured that out before the technology even deployed. The job that's being replaced is defined by what you can execute. The job that's being protected and is being paid for more is defined by what you decide. That distinction has always existed. AI just made it impossible to ignore. Nobody talks about this because AI bifurcates developer labor market, doesn't trend on Twitter. But it is exactly what the Stanford data says, and it is exactly what the hiring numbers show. So the question is not whether this affects you, because it does. The question is which side of this chart you want to be. So if you're a founder building a software product right now, subscribe. I break down how AI is changing product strategy, engineering teams, and the business decisions that actually decide whether your startup scales or not. Thank you so much for watching.